Hey, what is up you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Natalie. We are a little family of 3. It's me, I'm married, I have my husband and a little boy that's 2 years old. And yeah, so this video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be sharing something that is pretty personal to us. Now, this is something that happened to us almost 2 years ago now. We are getting closer to our, I don't want to call it anniversary because it's not a celebration, but at the same time it is, because my son is so much better now. But we are definitely getting closer to those days that we went through this experience 2 years ago. So I thought, why not? If I already have a hard time when these days are coming up, I think that it'll be good for me to share it, get this off of my chest even more. But yeah, if you're interested in knowing our experience, then just keep on watching this video. This is a disease that obviously you can tell by the title now. It's called Kawasaki disease, and you could just look it up on Google or go to YouTube. There's other videos about it, but I specifically wanted to come on here and talk about our experience with it because it is a very difficult disease to diagnose, especially if not all the symptoms are there. But I just want to give you a little bit of insight and tell you everything that we went through, share that with you. And I don't know if this were to happen with any of your kids or anybody that you know, a family member or a friend, any of their kids, so that you can have these things in mind and be aware of it, because this definitely is a sickness that if it's not treated on the 10-day mark, it can be very damaging to the little kid's heart. So to start off with, I want to tell you guys what shows up on Google if you search it up. I just decided to go ahead and tell you myself so that you don't have to click out of the video and go look it up. But basically it's just saying that this disease is something that causes inflammation throughout the blood vessels in the body, and that it can be resolved within days to weeks, giving aspirin and IV immunoglobulin, which that is, if you don't know, it's a medication they put through your IV that just has a lot of antibodies to help your immune system boost up and help fight whatever disease you have. There is an actual page for this disease, and it's in the American Heart Association page where they talk about it. So Kawasaki disease has its own page, so if you go to their own page there, you can find out a little bit more information about it. But I'm just telling you from our perspective. When my son was diagnosed with this, I wasn't going into different websites or anything. I just went to the fast Google search. So that's why we were very hopeful, and we didn't really know what was coming to us in the long run. But just to give you a little bit more details, in the Heart Association page of Kawasaki disease, they do talk about a little bit more about the symptoms for this disease, and that is fever, a rash, swelling of the hands and feet, irritation and redness of the whites of the eyes, swollen lymph glands in the neck, irritation and inflammation of the mouth, lips, and throat. This disease has been going for a really long time now. This disease is not something new, but because it's not rare either, but because the symptoms, they're pretty similar to a cold, pink eye, the flu, sicknesses like that, because obviously none of those sicknesses include a cough or anything like that. But anyways, so the cause of Kawasaki disease is still unknown till this day. It is thought that this disease comes from a virus, so it's like an autoimmune disease. But there have been cases in families where this disease affects more than one child in the family, and for those cases it is thought that then it could be something that has to do with the genes in the family. So it could probably indicate that it is hereditary. To me, I feel like it's just an autoimmune disease, and I will explain a little bit more on why I think that. Although this disease is highest in Japan, the disease has been reported worldwide now, so it has spread out. This condition is more frequent in children of Asian American descent, but it can occur in any racial or ethnic group. The average age of kids that are most affected by this are kids that are 2 years old, and boys will have this illness twice as often as a girl, so it is more common in boys as well. So now that you know a little bit more about this disease, I'm gonna go ahead and share our story with you. So I did go through my phone to look at the pictures just to make sure that I could be as close as possible to the dates when things happened. So I'm going to be inserting some pictures throughout this video as I'm talking. But basically, my son turned 4 months old on August 10 of 2017. And then on August 15 of 2017, that's the day that he got his 4-month-old shots. Now, I do have a whole opinion on shots for babies, but that's something that I'm not going to get too much into detail of. So my son ended up getting his shots on that day, on August 15, 2017, which I have my calendar pulled up so I can tell you like the days and stuff like that as well. So that was on a Tuesday when he got his shots, and the following day, Wednesday, he was fine and stuff. Because I want to say for his 2-month-old shots, my son did get a little bit of a fever, but it wasn't anything like a really high fever or anything like that. I think he did go up to like 100 or something like that, but he was good. He only had it for 1 day and then it went away. But for this one, his 4-month-old shots, the next day, which was Wednesday, I want to say he did get a little bit of a fever, but I think I gave him Tylenol and it went away, so it was okay. And then on Thursday, so August 17, he had no fever that day, and where he got the shots on his legs, it did feel a little bit hot right there, and he did have a little bit of bruising. So I was just doing like home stuff that I could do to help him, just, you know, to cool the area down. I was just placing ice packs on there and just massaging the area and stuff like that. But on Thursday, he didn't have a fever anymore. So then Friday came and he had a little bit of fever, like in the morning. I had noticed he had a little bit of fever, so I think I gave him Tylenol again and it went away. So then on August 19th, on a Saturday, so 4 days after his shots, we noticed that my son was looking like he was sick. We didn't start noticing this until like around noon. It was like from noon and then like all evening and night. That's when we were noticing that he was just like getting worse and worse and worse. But on that day, it was a Saturday. My husband is off on the weekend, so we were just trying to enjoy our day. This was the first time that I was gonna give my baby some baby food. Like, this was his first actual baby food. I felt like my baby was ready to start trying foods because he would always be staring at me and my husband when we would eat. But we did notice, like, we had him on the chair and he just, I don't know, like his little eyes, they just looked like he was kind of sad, like if he was coming up with a sickness or something. Like, he wasn't too excited about the food or anything. So at the same time, we noticed that he wanted to be sleeping more than usual. So that was another sign that we were like, okay, why is he sleeping so much, you know? But we already had plans for that day. We were gonna go to the mall and just enjoy our time together and stuff. So I was just thinking, like, I'm not gonna exaggerate. Like, he didn't have a fever yet or anything, so that's why I was just like, I don't want to be that first time mom that exaggerates and, you know, goes to the hospital right away when there wasn't even a fever yet or there wasn't like any worse symptoms. But so yeah, that rest of the day we were together, we were hanging out. when we got to the mall, which was like around the evening, when I took him out of the car seat to feed him, that was when I did notice that he felt pretty warm. So we didn't have a thermometer with us, but I did tell my husband, like, he feels warm to me, I wonder if he has a fever. But like I said, like, my son, he just wanted to be sleeping and stuff, so we just went into the mall, got the stuff that we needed to get, and we ended up leaving. And then after that, we ended up going to go visit one of my husband's brothers. It had been a while since we had spent some time with one of his brothers, so we ended up going to visit his brother after the mall. We did stay there pretty late because we started watching a movie, and I don't know, it was like around 10:30 or 11. So we had this little like sleeper. It would be really easy like to take it with us because we would just fold it, and it's very compact and you can fit it in your car and take it with you anywhere. But basically that's what we took with us. So that's where I had my son sleeping while we were watching the movie. But he was having a really hard time to sleep. Like, he was just being really fussy, crying a lot, and he just couldn't fall asleep. So then that's when we took his temperature, because he was feeling pretty warm to me still, or this time again, because I felt like he had kind of cooled down on his own. Like, I don't know, I guess the fever went away, but at this time it came back. And so we checked it, and he was like, I want to say, yeah, like 100.9 or 101, I don't remember exactly, but he did have a low-grade fever. So we gave him some Tylenol, and then we just came home because, you know, he was being fussy and stuff. So we came home, and that night I put Mateo to sleep with us on our bed just so that I could be checking him and stuff throughout the night. So we woke up like around 3 in the morning because I touched him and he felt like he was burning up. Like, I checked his temperature and he was like 102.5, 103. So I gave him Tylenol again, and all he wanted to do was just sleep. And since it was the middle of the night, like, I don't know, I just, again, like, I still beat myself up for these things, like my decisions and just the way of thinking of stuff. But I didn't know that there was something serious going on. But anyways, my thought was just like, I'm just gonna let my baby rest. I'm giving him Tylenol. I was doing the cold washcloths on his forehead, like trying to, you know, bring the temperature down. And I was like, I'm just gonna let him sleep. I'm gonna sleep, my husband's gonna sleep. Like, we'll just get up really early in the morning and take him to like an urgent care or whatever we decide to take him to in the morning. Which, you will hear all the mistakes that we made. I don't know, as first time parents, I guess, those are things that I was not prepared for. I didn't think through all the way. But the point is that I guess we took action, and we were trying to get answers, you know, one way or the other. But anyways, the next day, so Sunday, August 20th, we ended up taking my son to an urgent care. Right there, they didn't even have a doctor. I think it was like a registered nurse that took a look at my son, and he told us that my son had a pink eye and an ear infection. So he was gonna prescribe amoxicillin for that. And I was pretty confused, because I was like, I've never heard of pink eye with an ear infection together. But he explained that this is something common that happens in babies. I forgot exactly what that sickness is called, but it is something that happens a lot in babies, where they get a pink eye and an ear infection together at the same time. But I was still like, in the back of my head, I was not sure. Why? Because my son's eyes were very red. He had red eyes, which that's something that happens with pink eyes, right? But he didn't have all the little green boogies coming out of his eyes. His eyes were not stuck together like if he had pink eye. He didn't have that. So that was something that I was just like, I don't know, I'm like, I'm not too sure about this. But it was Sunday and my son's pediatrician, they were closed on that day. I'm still gonna take him to his pediatrician the next day. So that's what I did. Monday morning I called. You have to set an appointment, so they gave me the soonest appointment available that they had, and I took him in. I told his pediatrician what they had said at the urgent care, what they diagnosed him with. So she took a look at him and she said the same thing, that he had a pink eye and an ear infection, so that the diagnosis was correct, but that she wasn't happy with the medicine that they had prescribed him, so she was going to prescribe him something a little bit more different. So I'm like, okay, but at the same time I could see it in her face, like, and this is where I'm like, why didn't I say anything? Like, why didn't I speak up, But I could tell in her face she was not 100% sure that that's what my son had. So yeah, she diagnosed him with that. She prescribed the medication, and she did tell me, don't let his fever get high, be giving him Tylenol to keep the fever down. If my son's fever went any higher, to go ahead and take him to the nightlight urgent care that night. So I was like, okay, at what temperature should I think of taking him? And she said, if his fever gets to 104, you need to take him to urgent care. So I was like, what? 104? His fever could get to 104? And she's like, if it does, she's like, but I don't think it will. But for now, go ahead and start giving him the antibiotic. And she said, bring him back to me in 2 days, and I want to see how he's doing. So I was like, okay, we're gonna do that then. And even though I was still somewhat unsure, at the same time I was a little bit more calm, thinking like, okay, well, now his pediatrician gave me the same diagnosis, saying that he does have the pink eye and the ear infection, and she prescribed him the correct medication. Like, he's gonna get better, That's what I was thinking. So sure enough, that night, it was Monday night, I think my mom was already with me in the evening, or I don't remember how my mom ended up being with me. It was probably because she wanted to be helping me, keeping an eye on Mateo and stuff, because my husband was at work. But I remember that day I was searching up things like home remedies, like natural things that I could do to help with his pink eye and his ear infection, because when you have a pink eye, that's not really an infection most of the time. Sometimes it could be, but most of the time it's like a virus, so antibiotics won't really make it go away fast. A pink eye will just, like, since it's a virus, it'll just have to run its course and go away on its own. But sure enough, my son's temperature, when it was like 103 or 103.5, I don't remember, I did not let it get to 104. I was like, there's no way. Like, he was so irritable. He wasn't eating as normal anymore. He just wanted to be sleeping. If he wasn't eating, he would wake up because he would be, I guess, hungry. Since he wasn't eating, he didn't feel good. He obviously couldn't sleep like the way that he wanted to be sleeping because he had a fever. He just didn't feel good at all. Like, you could just tell he was getting worse and worse. And this is after him already starting on the medication. Like, he was just getting worse. So I remember my mom was like, let's just take him. Like, let's just take him where she said to take him. Like, let's just go. Like, she could tell too, like, that he was really sick. Like, there was definitely something wrong with him. So we ended up taking him to the nightlight urgent care. And the good thing is that there wasn't many people there because it was already really late. I think we got there probably around 10:30, somewhere around that time. And this is another thing too. I guess, like, I just didn't want to take him to Texas Children's Hospital because I was just thinking, like, from my experiences in the past, like from when I was little and just hearing stories and stuff, I know they like can take forever to take you in to look at you because it just gets so packed. So many kids so many sick kids there all the time, and it just takes forever to get a room unless you're like in a serious emergency. But I didn't want to take him there and just be all night there waiting for them to look at us just so that, you know, they could send us home again. Like, I don't know, that's just what I was thinking. So I just wanted something fast for my son to get seen fast and to get answers fast. We ended up just taking him there to the urgent care, and sure enough, they came and did his vitals a little bit like in the waiting room where we were at. So as soon as they checked his temperature, it was marking 104 point something. The PCA and another, I think it was a nurse or it was another lady with her, they were like, I started noticing like they were panicking, like they were like, take off all his clothes, get him undressed, he doesn't need to be wearing clothes right now, and bring him back here. And like they started walking fast and stuff. And then that's when I was just like, okay, like, so I started taking off his clothes and everything. Like, at this point I was panicking. Like, I had already given him Tylenol, and like I had the cold washcloth on his forehead, and that was not helping. His temperature was just going up higher and higher. Like, so in that moment I kind of froze a little bit. So, and then immediately after I kind of started crying and like walking after them, behind them. My mom was carrying my son, and the receptionist, she looked at me and she told me like that I needed to calm down, that everything was gonna be okay, and that they were gonna take care of my son. So I was like, okay, she's right, I need to calm down and everything's gonna be okay. So then after all of that, I called my husband. My husband already knew that we were there in the urgent care, but I called him to tell him like that his temperature was going up higher, and that, you know, he was just looking very sick, and that they were really worried about him. So I told him to just get out of work and go straight over there to meet me over there. So that's what he did. We were in the room waiting for the doctor to go in there to see us, and by that point my husband was already there. So the doctor came in, and I told her everything, you know, from the beginning, that he got his shots, his 4-month-old shots, that he had been having a little fever going on and off, and then the whole thing. I told her everything from the beginning, the diagnosis that he had earlier that day at the pediatrician's office. And she just said that to her that was not possible. He did have a little bit of fluid in his ear, but not enough fluid for him to have an ear infection, 1, and 2, a fever that high for the amount of fluid he had in his ear. Like, she said his ear didn't look that bad. And then she was asking the same, like what I was thinking about the mucus, like the little eye boogies that you get with pink eye. She was asking if he had that, and I told her no. So she's like, I don't think this is pink eye. So I'm like, okay, so then what is it? She said she wanted to do a urine test on him, because she said that with little boys sometimes their little tubes, urination tubes, I guess, that sometimes they don't develop completely, so they'll be really tiny, that the urine like shoots back into the bladder or something like that, and it ends up making them have a urine infection. So this is more common in boys than in girls. But so that was one of her thoughts, that it could be a urine infection, and that's why he was having the really high fevers. But she was still not sure about why his eyes were so red. She said that she was gonna do a Foley catheter to get the urine, so it could be more sanitary or something like that. But I don't remember what we talked about, why we decided to not try that at first. And so they ended up just taping a little baggie so that his urine would fall into the bag. So meanwhile we waited for my son to pee in that little baggie. She ended up sending us to a hospital that was close by for some labs. So she wanted to look at his white blood cell count, and the urgent care clinic was already closed, but she was gonna wait for us to come back to see if my son had already peed in the little baggie. But yeah, we ended up going to the hospital, and this was the first time that my son was gonna get blood work done, and I had no idea that this was gonna be the first time. I had no idea that this was gonna be the first time out of, it felt like 1,000 times after that that he had to get blood work done. So when we were there at that hospital getting his blood work, it was really easy, like fast and easy. And I don't know if this nurse, like, she was a genius or what, but I promise you, like, it was so fast and easy to get his blood work that day that I never thought that all of the following days that we were gonna need blood work from my son, that we were gonna have so much trouble with it, because that day it just seemed like so easy and fast. Like, you know, he cried for a little bit, but it was okay. But yeah, we ended up doing that. We went back to the urgent care. We looked into my son's diaper, and he still hadn't peed in the little baggie. He wasn't peeing enough because he wasn't eating enough. When we were there, like with his diaper open and stuff, he started peeing, so they caught it really fast. And it wasn't the most sanitary thing, but they just did a quick lab exam, and it tested positive for a urine infection for their quick lab exam. But the doctor did say that she was gonna send it to culture to be 100% sure that he had a urine infection. So since the quick lab test came back positive, she said that she was just going to give him 2 shots, 1 on each leg, of antibiotic. And I think this antibiotic was called Rocephin or something like that. So she said she was gonna do those shots of antibiotic, which she said that if he was in the hospital, admitted in the hospital, that's the type of antibiotic he would get through the IV, which is a really strong antibiotic. And so she said that if it was the urine infection happening, or the ear infection, the pink eye and all of that, that this antibiotic would take care of it, and that in less than 24 hours we would notice that his fever would slowly start going away. So we're like, okay. So we were hopeful once again, thinking like the lab, you know, the urine exam came back positive, and she's gonna give him this really strong antibiotic now, so he should be getting better soon, right? So we went home. It was a really hard night. My mom ended up spending the night with me because my husband had to work the next day. So my mom just ended up spending the night with me so that we could both be keeping an eye on my son. But we hardly got any sleep that night. Like, we just spent most of the night like in the bathtub, me in the bathtub with my son, having him in warm water, trying to, you know, get his fever to go down. And it was really hard because he was only 4 months, so I couldn't be switching. I couldn't be switching from Tylenol and Motrin. I could only be giving him Tylenol because I think Motrin is only for 6 months and up. So I could only be giving him Tylenol, but I would give him the Tylenol, and like within an hour his fever would be spiking back up again. And it was just crazy to me because with the Tylenol, I would have to wait, I think it was every 4 to 6 hours. They told me I couldn't, even if his fever was coming back up, I could not give it to him because I have to follow the instructions, something about the liver. So I was just trying everything on my end to keep his fever from going up. So anyways, the next day came along. So this was now Tuesday around midday. Same, like my son's fevers were spiking up. He was just looking worse. The eyes were still bloodshot red. So I ended up just calling his pediatrician, and I told her what happened the day before, you know, on Monday night, that I did end up having to take him to urgent care. And so she said, just bring him in to me, I want to see him again, and we'll go from there. So then I took him to her. We went back to his pediatrician clinic, and I told her that the doctor at the urgent care said that he did not have an ear infection, and that he did not have a pink eye, that his ear didn't look that bad for him to have a fever that high. And so she was just kind of like with a blank stare. Like, she said that she was gonna send me to the hospital that was nearby again, the same hospital that we had been to the day before, to get blood work done, because she wanted to look at his white blood cell count again to see if they were going any higher from the day before. And then she also said that she was going to give him another set of Rocephin antibiotic shots into his legs and that should do it, that he would be better with now a second set of shot of antibiotic. So I'm like, okay, so I guess that's what we're doing now. So he ended up getting a second set of antibiotic shot on his legs. We ended up going back to the hospital to get more blood work, and then we ended up going home. So that was on Tuesday. So by this point, I haven't even given my son the amoxicillin antibiotic anymore because of all the antibiotic shots that he's getting in his legs. So it wasn't necessary for me to be giving him the orally antibiotic anymore. But anyways, that day, Tuesday, we came home. Again, just waiting. It was just like a waiting game, just waiting for this fever to start going down because of all the antibiotic shots that he had gotten by this point on his leg already. But nothing was happening, so we still hadn't gotten a call back from the urgent care. They still hadn't told us if the culture came back positive or negative for his urine. So we still were not sure about that either. And we were considering to just take him to Texas Children's Hospital. But I think that we didn't end up doing that until the next day. So on that Wednesday, August 23rd, Wednesday morning, we decided to just take him to Texas Children's Hospital and see if we could get any answers there, because my son still did have his fevers. So we took all the paperwork from everything that, you know, all the diagnoses that we had gotten already and all the treatments that he had gotten, the shots. We took the prescription to show them what they had prescribed for him, everything. So they took a look at him there and they just said, well, if he tested positive for the urine infection, how come you're not giving him the orally antibiotic? And I was like, you're not listening to me. They gave him shots of antibiotic and they said that by now he should be getting better. And they were like, well, he probably just has a virus then. It just needs to run its course. If the antibiotic is not making the fever go away, then he has a virus. So that's what they were telling me then, that he has a virus. I left from that hospital crying, you guys. Like, I was like, this is so not fair. Like, there's something wrong with my son. They ended up sending us home once again. So we came home with my son. We were just here in my room, feeling desperate, feeling like we don't know what's wrong with him. And we just wanted answers. Right in that moment, that's when we got a phone call from urgent care with the urine culture results. And they told us that it was negative, that my son did not have a urine infection. So then that's when I was like, I knew it. I knew he didn't have that, because if he did, the antibiotic shot that they had given him would have already helped, you know, with the fever and all of that. So I ended up calling his pediatrician back and I told her the results of the urine exam, the culture exam for the urine, and she said, bring him back to me again and I'm gonna send you guys to the hospital to get blood work done again. I want to see if his white blood cells have gone up even higher from the last time that we did it. Oh, and I also told her what happened at Texas Children's that morning, that they had sent us home. So she said that she was going to do the blood work and that for us to come home again, and that she was going to give us a call to let us know the results of the blood. And she did say that if his white blood cells had gone up even higher, that she was gonna call Texas Children's, a different campus this time, because I told her I didn't want to go back to the medical center. I told her that I wanted her to call Texas Children's Woodlands Hospital. And so she said that if his white blood cell count was higher, that she was gonna call them and like, she can't really give orders for them to see us because she wasn't a Texas Children's pediatrician, but she could send a message saying like that we were on our way and kind of just tell them like what's been going on, you know, a little bit of our process that we've been through already, you know, that his white blood cell counts were going higher and stuff like that. So anyways, we ended up coming home. So that evening, she honestly, I can't remember exactly right now, but she either called us on that Wednesday evening, if not Thursday morning. So she ended up calling us and saying that my son's white blood cell count was just going higher and higher, which indicated that there was definitely something wrong with him. So she wanted us to just take him to the hospital once again, and hopefully they will do all exams like all over again. So basically that's what we did. She called over there to the hospital and let them know that we were gonna be on our way already. The Woodlands hospital doesn't get as busy as the medical center, but we still did have a pretty long wait because I think on that day they were pretty busy. We were probably there waiting for like 5 or 6 hours, a really long time, with my sick baby, with his fevers, with him crying and just being so irritable, not wanting to eat and stuff like that. But anyways, they finally took us in. They finally gave us a room, and I get so emotional with this part because we got so lucky. So lucky. I had been praying so much for God to send me somebody that will finally say, you're gonna stay and we're gonna find out what's wrong with your son. And that's exactly what happened. So the nurse that we had that came in to, you know, hear the whole explanation about everything that has been happening with my son, he really did take his time and he allowed me to tell him everything. So basically everything that I have explained to you guys so far, I explained to him, like all the way from the beginning, from when he got his shots, from when he started with the fever, everything I explained to him. I wanted him to know every single thing that we had been through already. And to be honest with you guys, like, he was upset. He was pretty pissed. He was like, I cannot believe that they've just been throwing you around, sending you place to place to place, and this is crazy. He's like you have had so many diagnoses already and you still have no answers. Like, nobody has gotten to the root of the fever, and that's exactly what it was. Nobody had gotten to the root of the fever. What was the real reason of my son's fever? Nobody knew it yet, and people were just guessing what he had, which I'm so sorry. Like, I don't mean to offend any nurses or doctors or anything, but it's just so crazy to me. But at the same time, I tell myself that I need to understand, because this disease is very hard to diagnose. But he said that he was just going to start all the way from the beginning and do everything all over again. He was going to do blood work, urine exam, he was going to do a chest x-ray, and he was even going to do a spinal tap, because I hadn't even noticed, but my son had his soft spot was bulging, which that's a sign for like meningitis. So that was another diagnosis guess that it could probably be meningitis. So he was going to get also a spinal tap. So right away they started on an IV because he was pretty dehydrated. He wasn't having as many pee diapers anymore. So I was hopeful. I was like, this is it. Like, we're gonna get answers and my son's gonna get better and we're gonna make it through this. So anyways, they got to the, you know, we went through the whole suffering again of the blood work, the urine exam, all of that. We went through all of that again. But it was okay, because this time, I feel like this time we were gonna get answers, you know. After those exams, they were gonna do the spinal tap. So for this, they asked us who wanted to stay with my son. Only one of the parents could stay with him. So my husband ended up being the one to stay with my son in the room, and I just stepped out. I was down the hallway waiting for them to tell me they were done so I could come back in. But I could hear everything, so that was really hard, very heartbreaking to hear. But you know, I just had to stay as strong as I possibly could for my son, and that's all I kept thinking. Like, I just need to stay strong and we're gonna get through this. I was just trying to stay positive. So yeah, then after that they did the x-ray and we were just in a room waiting for the results. I think we stayed waiting all night for results, and they were just giving him the fluids through the IV and Tylenol just to bring his fever down, just waiting for results and stuff. And they told us that everything came back normal. Nothing was positive for any kind of sickness for the things that they were testing. So that they still didn't know what was wrong with him. They still didn't know what kind of sickness he had, but they said that they were gonna admit us into the hospital because they were gonna talk about what other tests could be done to him, because they definitely did need to do other kinds of tests to find out what was wrong. So they ended up moving us to another room, like to an official floor and room and everything. So then that's when they talked to us, the doctors, a little bit more about the other tests they were thinking about doing. So they said that they were gonna do an ultrasound of his stomach and an MRI. Don't remember if they did both of those exams on the same day or if it was on separate days, but I do remember they did the pelvic exam first before the MRI. So for this one, it was just like an ultrasound. They just put like some type of cream on his stomach. It was kind of like a machine, like the ones they use for ultrasounds for women when they're pregnant. So they just did that exam, and which my son did really good with it. I think they played like some movie, or they had some lights on the ceiling for him, so that was really easy and calming. It was like one of the calmest tests that we had gotten done so far for him. So then yeah, we ended up going back to the room, and then this is when they told us, I think hours later or maybe the next day, I don't remember, like I said, but they told us that everything was normal with the pelvic exam. Because the pelvic exam was normal, that's when they decided that they were gonna also do an MRI, just to, I guess, look even more deeply inside his body to see if there was anything there that they were missing. On this day that he got that test done, that day was a really hard day for me, for my son especially. But my family ended up coming to the hospital to see us, which my parents and my older brother and my sister, they ended up coming to the hospital to visit us, and they ended up bringing food for us and just little things that would keep me and my husband as healthy as possible, and especially me because I was breastfeeding my son. So things to help me to stay as healthy as possible, to help my son get better with like my breast milk and stuff like that. But that day was very emotional because I hadn't seen my siblings since any of it started. So whenever I saw them, I just broke down really bad, and it was emotional for me to see them because of everything that we were going through. Another thing that we were worried about at that moment is that we knew that a hurricane was gonna hit in Houston. That's whenever Hurricane Harvey hit, and this was a Category 4 hurricane, which Houston flooded very, very badly with this hurricane. So because of this hurricane, the hospital was already telling visitors that they couldn't stay long, that they could just come for a little bit, and then they were already saying that after a certain time, like, all visitors needed to leave the hospital because they didn't want to have the situation where visitors were stuck in the hospital and then they have to provide food. My family just went for a little bit to visit us, and then they had to leave, which it was really hard to see them go because we already knew that Mateo was gonna get the MRI done. And I don't know, like, I had never experienced a child having an MRI, but the way that they were explaining it to us, they just made it seem like it was a pretty serious test and we weren't gonna be able to be with him in the room. So I had my husband there, but I really wanted my family to be there with me. So anyways, the time for the MRI came. So they took my son and they took us to, this was on a different floor, so they took us to the waiting room for the MRI testing. And there in the waiting room, they told us that the whole exam would probably take about an hour, so that they would come in an hour to get us. So we're like, okay. So we're in the waiting room and a whole hour passes and they were not coming for us. So at this point I was getting really nervous. Like, I just had a feeling that something bad was happening. So I was just pacing back and forth, and my husband kept telling me, like, you need to calm down, like everything's gonna be okay. And I was just like, no, like it's been past an hour, like it's been an hour and a half already. Where are they? They said only an hour, you know. So I was just freaking out, like what is going on? It was about to be 2 hours since the test started when they finally came, and they told us that they ended up taking longer than what they thought, because once they already had my son going into the tube for the MRI, his oxygen level started dropping very, very low, and that they had to take him out very fast, and they had to make the decision to intubate him because his oxygen was really low. So they basically intubated him, and they said that his oxygen went really low because they had to sedate him to put him into the tube, because they needed him to stay as still as possible. That he couldn't move, so he had to be sedated for that. So his oxygen level could have dropped because of the sedation, and also because of how sick he was. So his little body couldn't take it, so they had to take him out and intubate him in order to get done with the test completely. So as you can imagine, like, that was very hard to hear. Took us to see him already, and everything was okay at that time after the test and everything. My son's voice, like when he was crying and starting to wake up and stuff, his voice was very raspy, and I think it was because of the tube that they had put down his throat. But yeah, they just sent us back to the room. We were just waiting for the results, and that's when they ended up telling us that everything was normal. I think this was the next day that we got the results, that everything was normal with him, with the MRI. So then at that moment we're like, okay, so what's next now? Like, what other tests are you gonna do now? Because we hadn't talked about any further tests from the MRI, so we didn't know like what was their plan after that. So they said that they were gonna talk about it, and that they would let us know the next day what was gonna happen. So we ended up doing the MRI on the 26th, which was a Saturday, and then the next day, Sunday, that's when we woke up to the news saying that Houston had flooded, and my family, they had problems. They encountered also with flooding and stuff like that, but they made it somewhere safe and they were okay. But they couldn't come to us, like nobody could come to us to the hospital. Nobody could really go anywhere because everything was flooded in Houston. But anyways, on the 27th, that's when we got the results for the MRI saying that everything was negative. The only thing they did say about the MRI was that he was showing extra fluid in his head, and they were thinking that that was just because of all the swelling, because again his soft spot was bulging, and I don't know if it was because of the fever and stuff like that. But they said that he did have a little bit of extra fluid in his head, but that it wasn't something alarming or something that could cause, you know, the high fevers and all the symptoms that he was showing. Which, by the way, I just remembered, I haven't explained the symptoms that my son was showing. I have just told y'all about the fever and the red eyes. So he also did have very, very bright red lips and a bright like strawberry tongue, like, and it even had like the little bumps on it. And then on one of those days from the past week that we had been going back and forth to, you know, the clinics with him, on one of those days when we were with the pediatrician, she did notice a little bit of a faint rash on his back, but that just lasted on him for one day or maybe a couple of hours. But it was very faint, like I said, and it was only on his back. So these are the only symptoms that my son was showing. But anyways, now going back to the testing and all that, infectious disease was involved also in my son's case. It was a group of doctors, and they said that they were gonna get together and talk about everything that had been happening already and come up with a plan and see what, you know, what they were gonna do from there. So that night of Sunday, August 27th, those are the things that the doctors told us. So that whole evening I was just thinking and thinking, you know, of different things. I'm pretty sure I was on Google looking up different sicknesses that had those symptoms that my son had. I don't think I even found one answer, or probably did, and it was something that they had already thought it was and ruled it out. And I don't know, we ended up going to sleep that night there in the hospital, and I remember falling asleep thinking about everything that we had been through already, and still no answers, and my son's still with the fever. I guess I just fell asleep thinking, like, you know what, they haven't checked my son's heart. So I guess because I fell asleep thinking that, I had a dream that they were checking my son's heart and that he had a hole in his heart, and that was the answer, that's what they had missed. Basically, I woke up, you guys, I woke up from that dream crying. I was crying so bad, and I woke up my husband and I told him it's his heart. So yes, my husband was just trying to calm me down, telling me that everything was gonna be okay, and that reminding me that the doctors were gonna be back in the morning and that we would be able to talk to them, and, you know, mention that what about his heart, that his heart hasn't been, you know, looked at or something like that. So then it was finally the next day, Monday, August 21st, and sure enough, the doctors were there pretty early that day, and they came in and they started talking to us. I hadn't even gotten a chance to tell them about, I don't think I was going to tell them about my dream, but I was going to ask about what about his heart. His heart hasn't been taken a look at, but they came in and they told us that they had two predictions, like, of what kind of sickness he could have. That they were like in between two kind of sicknesses, and they were in between Kawasaki disease and cat scratch disease, which both of these me and my husband, we had never heard of, but they explained a little bit of both, and they told us that Kawasaki disease, you know, the whole explanation that I just gave y'all in the beginning of this video, but very briefly. But they did tell us that that disease could damage arteries of the heart, and that it can produce inflammation in the blood vessels of the body and cause the fever. And some of the symptoms of it are the very red bloodshot eyes and the red lips. And then with the cat scratch disease, they said that symptoms are very similar to that also. I think the cat scratch disease also has the red eyes and the red lips and the very high fevers. With the cat scratch disease, they asked us if my son had been around any cats, or if we had any cats at home, which I did have a cat while I was pregnant, but right after we had my son, we got rid of that cat. And my mother-in-law does have cats at her house also, but we probably went to her house once or twice since Mateo had been born, up to that point of him being 4 months. And when we would go to her house, we never even got him anywhere near the cats, and the cats always stayed outside, and we would always be inside my mother-in-law's house. Cat scratch disease, they said that it doesn't necessarily mean that a cat scratches the baby for the baby to get sick with this disease. It could just be like from a flea. They said that with cat scratch disease, that they would have to send his blood work to a lab, and that it would take 3 to 5 days for them to get those results for a positive or negative, and that if he was positive for that, that they would just give him it's a specific type of antibiotic that they would use to treat that disease, and that he would just get that antibiotic and he would be completely back to normal. But with the Kawasaki disease, they said that if the child reaches the 10-day mark of fever and passes that 10-day mark of fever with no treatment to Kawasaki disease, there can be permanent damage to the heart. So they said that at this point they couldn't wait any longer. They weren't going to take the risk. They were going to take a look at his coronary arteries to see if they were dilated, which means if they were bigger than what their normal size should be, then that would indicate to them that this is most likely Kawasaki disease. So yes, these are the things that they told us, and as they were telling us these things, I just turned to look at my husband with my eyes, trying to tell him, like, isn't this so crazy? And yeah, after the doctors left, that's what I told him. This is so crazy. Everything that is happening, everything that we're going through. And then the fact that I had just said last night that that's what it was. That's what my son had, that it was his heart, that there was something wrong with his heart. But anyways, you guys, so they came in with the ultrasound machine. That test got done in the same room where we were already at, and they did the little exam, and then the technician left. The technician is not able to give us any other results, so then we had to wait for the doctors to come back again and give us the results for that test. So yeah, when they finally did come back, they did tell us that his coronary arteries were definitely enlarged, so that this was Kawasaki disease to them. And since we were at the 10-day mark of fever, that they couldn't wait any longer, and that they were going to start giving him a treatment through the IV that was just going to help his immune system come up and fight this disease, and his fever would slowly start going down until, you know, back to normal, no more fevers. So they said that they were going to be giving him this treatment for a period of 24 hours, and that we should start noticing him improving. So then the next day, like we did, after the 24 hours, we noticed a huge difference in my son. Like, he finally started smiling again. He finally started like having an appetite again, which that was just amazing. So we were so happy that, you know, after everything that we had gone through, that things were getting better. But little did we know that things were going to take a turn and actually get worse than they were from the beginning. But so yeah, I think it was the following day they came, and that evening, the following day or 2 days later, they came again and said that they were gonna do another ultrasound just to see how he was, like with his coronary arteries. So they did say that if they noticed that his coronary arteries were going back to normal, like even just a tad bit, that they would send us home with my son just taking aspirin, which this was to help to thin his blood so that he wouldn't have any blood clots or anything like that, since his coronary arteries were enlarged. But they said that there could be a possibility that his coronary arteries, instead of getting better, that they were going to get bigger, because he didn't get treatment until exactly the 10-day mark. And they said that if that was the case, that they were going to end up sending us to the medical center. So, you know, we were just praying so much and being hopeful, praying that his arteries were getting better instead of, you know, getting larger. So they did that exam, and they ended up telling us that unfortunately his arteries were getting bigger, so that they were gonna have to transfer us to the medical center, because in the medical center, Texas Children's, that's where more of their cardiologists specialists are at, and the they did have cardiologists in this hospital where we were at, but the ones in the medical center have dealt with this type of disease even more, so that's why they wanted to transfer us to the medical center. Another thing that I want to say is that because of Hurricane Harvey and all the flooding that there was in Houston, we did have to wait a couple of days to get transferred, and during that time they still had to be doing blood work on my son for other medications that they were giving him. I think they had started him on steroids and other types of medications just to help with the dilation and all the inflammation in his body and things like that. But they would have to do blood work just to be looking at all his counts. It was a white blood cell count for sure that they were looking at, and other levels in his blood that they needed to be looking at daily. My son, because he was only 4 months old, they would always have so much trouble getting his blood work. They always had to come in with an ultrasound machine, and even with the ultrasound machine they would have a bunch of misses, and that was just because his veins were just very tiny. And I think the other thing also is that his blood would just clot very easily. They would get a good poke and the blood would start coming out. His blood would clot very fast, so they would have to stop that one and look for another one and things like that. So that was always very hard to watch, because me and my husband, we had to help. We always had to be, well, we didn't have to be there when my son was getting poked, but we wanted to be there, like, to make sure, you know, that everything's okay. And we would be there helping them, holding my son down so that they could poke him and stuff, which that was another very hard thing that we had to go through, especially since my son was already 4 months old. He would just look up at us and with his little eyes crying, and the way he would stare at us, almost like if he was saying, like, "Mommy, Daddy, help me, like, why are they doing this to me?" It was very, very heartbreaking to experience all of that with my son. So yeah, they ended up transferring us to the medical center, and when they transferred us over there, it was sometime towards the end of that week that we ended up being transferred to the medical center. Like I said, we did have to wait a couple of days because of the flooding in Houston. So over there in the medical center, they didn't have a room available on the floor that they use for all the kids that have heart problems. So they ended up putting us on a different floor, and I wasn't too happy about that, but they said that my son was still gonna get the same type of treatment as to if he was on the heart floor. The cardiologist and all the doctors that needed to be seeing him on the heart floor were still gonna come down to the floor that we were at to see him, and that it would be okay, that there was nothing wrong with that. It was a couple of days that we were there on that floor. Although they had already explained to me everything about that my son would get the same type of treatment, I was still kind of like pushing it on the doctors. So I remember that day I was pushing it even more on one of the doctors, saying that, you know, I wasn't happy that I was on that floor, and the doctor was telling me like that it was okay, that my son was getting the same kind of treatment as to if he was on the other floor. But I don't know, I just like felt like we had gone through so much already. I just wanted to be, you know, 100% safe. So anyways, the next day we got sent to where they would do my son's ultrasounds. We would always have to leave his actual room to get an ultrasound. Every day he was getting a heart ultrasound to see how his arteries were doing, to see if there wasn't any aneurysms or blood clots coming up that happened overnight or something like that. My husband had already gone back to work. It had already been like 2.5 weeks that he had taken off. On this day my dad was with me, so we ended up going to get my son's ultrasound done of his heart. And on this specific day, I remember looking at the screen and it just looking very, very different compared to the other times that he had gotten the ultrasound done. And I could also see it in the technician's face that she looked pretty worried. So after this exam, I told my dad, there's something wrong. And he was just like, really? Like, why are you saying that? And I was like, I was looking at the screen, 1, I was looking at her face, 2, and I just have a feeling that there's something wrong. So I went back to the room, and that's when we were going down the hallway, and we already knew. You could see all the nurses and doctors and just people inside my son's room connecting all these machines. And as soon as we came in, they started putting stickers all over him, and I just looked at my dad and I was like, there's something wrong. I knew it. I knew there was something wrong. So the doctor was in there, and he told us that they had to do an emergency CT scan because they suspected that my son had some blood clots in his coronary arteries, for me to stop feeding him because they were gonna have to put him completely to sleep. And since he had already had that incident with the MRI where his oxygen level dropped, that they weren't even going to take the risk, that they were just gonna put him to sleep and immediately intubate him. So they wanted me to stop feeding him. They wanted him to not eat anything for at least 3 hours, or 3 or 4 hours, I can't remember, before starting him on this exam. So my son, it was really, really hard because I knew he was hungry and I couldn't feed him. And on top of that, I was just so worried about this exam. They made me sign a paper saying that these are all the risks that happen with this type of exam. That was another really hard thing for me to do, but it had to be done for them to know if he did have blood clots or not. And they did tell us that if he did have blood clots, that they were gonna have to come up with a solution. There was 2 things that they could do, but both of them did involve a surgery. So they said that that would be something that we would have to talk about afterwards, once they would know if he did have blood clots or not. They ended up sending us to a waiting room again, and we were there for hours waiting and waiting. And they said that this time it would take longer because after that they were gonna take him to recovery. So during this whole time we were just in the waiting room, just praying a lot and just asking God to help my son. They finally came and called us, and this is when they told us that he was very, very sick and they needed to have him in intensive care unit, and that he was still intubated because he wasn't breathing on his own yet. He was just very weak and he was very sick. And although he didn't have the fever anymore, his body was just very, very weak. His heart was very damaged. And they also did tell us the good news was that he didn't have any blood clots, but the bad news was that they ended up seeing that he did have 7 aneurysms, which, if you don't know what that is basically because of so much inflammation on certain spots of his arteries. Aneurysms happen, which they're just like a bigger inflammation on that specific spot of the artery, which causes, like, you could say, like a bubble. What the blood does is starts swirling around in there because it doesn't have a smooth pathway. So because it starts swirling around in there, it runs the risk, a very high risk, of it clotting. So they said that he had 7 aneurysms, and one of them that was really, really big out of the 7. And so they were very, very concerned about these aneurysms, and they said that because of it, that he was gonna start on a new medication, a blood thinner that needed to be shots on his legs, daily shots on his legs. So now he was gonna be on the aspirin, on the steroids. I think there was another medication, I can't remember what it was for, but also adding another blood thinner, but now as a shot to his leg. So he was gonna have blood thinner shots twice a day, 1 in the morning and 1 at night. And they predicted that he was gonna have to be on these shots for 9 to 12 months, which meant that when it was finally time to go home, either me or my husband, we're gonna have to be the ones giving my son these shots to his legs. After they give us those results, they finally let us go back into the ICU unit to see him, and he was still intubated, he was still sedated, he had his eyes closed. It was definitely really hard to see him like that, and it was just really heartbreaking. And we were in the IC unit for I think 20 hours, waiting for him to just be a little bit stronger, to start breathing on his own, so that they could consider taking the intubator out. But through the process, like, I could tell he was kind of already starting to wake up a little bit more and more. I would hold his hand and he would just hold my hand back like a little bit tighter, or he would squeeze me a little bit. And that was the hardest thing, because then that's when I would like tell the nurse, he's waking up, like he just squeezed my hand, he's waking up, can you take that thing out now? And she would tell me like, no, look at the machine. Most of his breathing right now is being done through the machine. If we were to take that out, we're gonna have to put it back in, because his oxygen level is gonna be very low. So it was just the waiting thing. And obviously, like, I hated seeing my son there on the bed like that, and I just wanted him to be better. But when he was starting to wake up more and more, like, I could see tears coming down his face, and he would start moving his head to the sides, and I could tell he was uncomfortable. But we got through it, he got through it, and he's my little strong boy, he's my little hero. So yeah, they were able to take out the tube, and they came in, analyzed everything, and make sure he was doing good and all of that. And then that's when they started doing the shots on his legs for the blood thinner. And then also, I was forgetting to tell you guys, so during the CT scan, that was when I met a new cardiologist, and God put her to work with me and Mateo, and I am just so grateful with, you know, certain things, the way they played out. Yeah, there was moments where I would feel like I was losing my faith. There was moments when I would be very hopeful and my faith was very strong, but then something would happen again with my son, and we would go a step back, and I would feel again like, why is this happening to us? And which is wrong. It was wrong of me to think that. But at some moments I felt anger, like I just felt like that it was unfair and stuff like that. But I would just try to remind myself that God is so big, and that he does miracles, and that he was gonna work, and he was working on my son, and he still is working on my son. And I would just remind myself of that, so that things get better. But I feel like God sent me this doctor for my son, because she was the sweetest person ever, the most caring. You could tell she cared so much. She gave me her number, her cell phone number. No doctor had done that. And she said, if anything happens, you call me immediately to my cell phone number. I wanted her to be his cardiologist, and she is. She's the one that looks at my son all the time now, because we do still have to be going to follow-up appointments. Anyways, after that whole situation, my son got out of ICU unit. After that, they actually ended up putting us on the floor for the heart specialist. We ended up going to that floor, and they said that from there they were just going to be doing daily heart echoes and the daily blood work, and just giving him his medications, and that they were going to start teaching me how to give my son the shots on his legs for the blood thinner. And yeah, from there they just said that they were gonna just be keeping an eye on his heart ultrasounds, trying to see like if they were seeing small improvements, that's when they were gonna start considering sending us home. So that's what ended up happening. We probably stayed there like 5 more days, so in total we stayed there like 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. It was a long time that we ended up staying total in the hospital. And the last couple of days, like it was probably like the last 3 days that we were there, we were okay to come home already. But what was holding us back is that me and my husband, we still didn't feel comfortable giving my son the shots. And this was another part that was so hard for us to do. Like, you know, we couldn't wrap the thought around our heads that we were gonna have to be doing this now every single day to my son, giving him shots on his legs, and he's only 4 months old. So this was something very hard for us, but we did it. And they had us practicing like on a doll at first, and then they were kind of like, okay, like this is the only thing keeping y'all here, like y'all need to, you know, basically get it together and just do it already. So for the first try, I ended up doing the first try. So the nurse was there obviously watching me and helping me, but I kind of basically, like, I was holding the syringe and I gave my son the shot and everything. But when I gave him the shot, it was so hard. I just immediately after I started crying, I could feel my face super red, like my whole body was just hot, like I was just feeling really hot. And I was crying and I was just like, I did it wrong, I did it wrong. I told the nurse like this, I just kept saying that, like I was just like, I did it wrong, I did it wrong, and I did it wrong. And she was like, no sweetie, you did a good job, you did really good, like don't worry, you did really good. But honestly, I think it was more the thought of that. I think it was more the thought that now I had to be giving my son shots every single day, and I just couldn't wrap that around my head. I just couldn't wrap the whole situation around my head, because I just kept thinking like, how did this happen so quickly and so fast? And it just felt like out of nowhere. Like, how do you go from your child being so healthy to being this sick and having to take all this medication and having for me and my husband to give him shots? It was so crazy. And which, by the way, as you guys can tell, I still have trouble with it. I have definitely gotten way better at telling the story, because I have told a lot of our family members already the story, but I don't think I've given anyone this many details. So every time I tell my son's story, I cry, because it's still a very emotional topic for me to talk about, because it just brings all those memories back. But I am getting better at talking about it and not crying as much, which is a good thing. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I'm able to talk about it more now without crying as much is because my son is getting better, you guys. He is getting better, and these are tears of joy now, because God has listened to our prayers, and he is so amazing. He is still working on my son. I know that he is, because my son hasn't completely recovered yet, but he is so much better, and his recovery has been amazing, because even his cardiologist has said that the way that my son has recovered, it's basically a miracle, because other kids do not recover as well as my son. Which at the same time, that breaks my heart so much, because I can just imagine what other mommies are going through out there that have had their kids go through this sickness as bad as my son or worse. But we are definitely very truly blessed that my son, you know, he's recovering so well the way that he is. There's way more details that I could talk about, you know, after we left the hospital and things like that, but let me know if that's something that you guys would be interested in knowing about. I have been talking for like an hour and a half already, so I'm not sure how long this video is gonna be, how many things I will be able to cut out, because I kind of do want you to know all of the details. But very quickly, I also do want to say that recently we went to one of my son's follow-up appointments. I think it was last week, which I kind of posted a little bit of stuff on Snapchat and Instagram. So if you follow me on those, you probably saw that, which I did have some people ask me what was wrong, because like I said, not everybody knows the details of everything that we went through with my son. So that's why people were a little bit confused, because I never really shared anything. I just felt like I wasn't ready to share it, you know. It's just really hard for me to talk about. But anyways, we did go to his follow-up appointment, and the doctor did say that, so basically it's been probably like 6 months now since she told us that Mateo, out of 7 aneurysms, he only has 1 to 2 left. And I say 1 to 2 because he basically has 2 left, but one of them is like basically almost back to normal, and then the other one, I think that one was the biggest one that they had told us that out of the 7 he had one that was really enlarged, and that's the one that he still has left that has not gone back to normal. So that's really good. Like out of 7 aneurysms, that's how many he has left now to recover from. And so she did tell us this time, so it had been like 6-7 months since we had last gone, and we went again, and she told us that that 1 aneurysm that's pretty pronounced there that is still left is still there, and is showing like a very tad small improvement from the 6-7 months ago that she took a look at it. So we're gonna continue to be going to his follow-up appointments, and hopefully that aneurysm goes back to normal. But she did say that either at the end of next year of 2020, and if not at the beginning of 2021, she wants to go ahead and do a CT scan, just to make sure that she's looking at everything clearly, just because with an ultrasound you can see stuff but it's not 100% accurate. So she would want to go in and do a CT scan just to be 100% sure of everything that she's seeing, and that way she can see all the way around the heart as well. And she said that she wanted to wait a little bit longer for the CT scan. If Mateo is a little bit older, maybe he'll be better at understanding that he needs to stay still, and that way they don't have to put him to sleep for the exam, which I was so happy to hear that, because since we had left from the hospital, since we got sent home, from that point on, I think like half a year after we had gotten released from the hospital, we did have to go back for a CT scan just to make sure that there wasn't any clots that had developed in the aneurysms. And for that one, he did have to be put to sleep again, which it was very hard for us to go through all of that once again. Mateo's still taking aspirin right now. I had actually kind of stopped giving it to him because I was just being hopeful, thinking that with the healthy foods and all that, he is getting better, which I still think he is. The healthy foods are helping him a lot. One of the foods that is my favorite, and I feel like I know that has had a lot to do with his recovery, is the beets, which, if by the way that's something that you didn't know, beets are very good for the heart, for a healthy heart. But yeah, you guys, that's one of the main reasons that I love looking out for my son, looking out for my family. Yes, we are human and we like to eat unhealthy, we like to eat delicious food also, but most of the time I try to cook as healthy as I possibly can. So for now, we just have to wait for the next heart echo, which right now I think we have it scheduled for December. So in a couple of months we're gonna go back again and see how Mateo's doing. And yeah, like I said, if you guys would like to know more details, like how it was once we were back home, how Mateo was recovering, like if he was meeting his milestones and stuff like that. What I mean by that is like with his crawling, and like if you want to know all the details about that, because we did have issues with all of that as well, let me know down in the comments and I can definitely make a part 2 for this video. So hopefully this helps you out, opens up your eyes as well, like how things can change so fast in a blink of an eye. And I'm sure most of you know that already, but this definitely did change mine and my husband's lives a lot. We definitely have a different way of seeing things, but we know that God is with us. God always does amazing things. And thank you so much for all of your love and all your support. I also want to say thank you to all of the people that have been praying for us right now for, you know, this other situation that we're in our family. So yeah, you guys, that's gonna be it for right now. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end if you did, and I'll see you next time with a new video. Bye. What's there left to say? Throw your stones the river.